Nate, I appreciate you coming back on the show.
It's interesting how much things have changed since, I think you said it's been about exactly 1 year since I was initially on your podcast. And, just 1 year ago, we met each other to do the podcast.
Yeah, a lot has changed. You became a father. We did high rocks. You've got more animals on the ranch. Pretty wild. I want to start with high rocks because that was a cool experience for me. I actually vowed, I don't know if I told you this, I vowed I would never do one. I don't know did I tell you that before we did?
So you vowed you would never do high rocks. And whenever I texted you, hey, have you heard about high rocks? You want to do one? You just, no questions asked. Yeah, let's do it.
That is literally what happened. So I vowed, because I'm like, I'll never do high rocks. It's not my style of training. I won't do it. And then you texted me, and I thought about it for like 3 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, man, let's do it. Because for some reason, I feel like there's like literally one, maybe two people in the world that could ask me to do high rocks that I would do it with them, and it was you. Ended up being a fantastic experience. Like, you've already done it before, but for me, it was the first time I had like really pushed myself for fitness since, like college ball. I'm curious, because that was your third or fourth? Third? Obviously, I mean, you grew up, or you are a CrossFitter by nature. Training physical fitness is very important for you, but like, what is it about high rocks that you've grown to like to do 3 in a row, or 3?
Ever since the first one, I've appreciated the beautiful simplicity of it. It's such a simple format. And what they've done so well is they've created a fitness competition of sort that can appeal to like very, I don't want to say low level, but like entry point average people that are really trying to push themselves and try something really challenging, all the way up to elite level obstacle course racers, and even now professional CrossFitters getting in and at it. So it's appealing to all those vast levels where CrossFit it's got that big learning curve of skills and strength, and it's a little bit more intimidating. And I just think that High Rocks has done such a good job of just the fundamentals, beautiful, basic fundamentals, and the course structure and setup is so beautifully done, and it's fun.
Yeah,
it's fun. And I said this after my first High Rocks race, that was more fun than any CrossFit competition I had ever done.
Really,
hands down. It's just a lot more fun. And I don't know how you felt after it, but like, obviously it leaves you feeling exhausted, and like, you pushed yourself, but you don't feel like you got ran over by a freaking train.
was that the case after CrossFit?
Oh yeah. Like, a lot of those CrossFit competitions at the higher level, like after you're done, especially if it's a 2-day competition, like you just feel like you got hit by a train.
Yeah.
So there's that. Maybe it's just getting into my old age, I've come to really appreciate those things more. And then another thing, I think that training for High Rocks is just like, so when you're training and competing at a high level in CrossFit, you should really do like deload cycles. So you hit like really hard strength, you hit really hard endurance, and you build different energy systems, and then you sort of deload to give your body a break. Training for High Rocks is like you're building that steady state aerobic system. You can do that all year long, and so that's really appealing for me as well. And then also like the training aspect again, like a lot of times if you're training really hard for CrossFit, again, your body's going to be feeling a little bit beat up. High Rocks, the carryover, building that aerobic system, the carryover onto the farm was great. Like I would get out of the gym feeling loose, limber, got a good sweat, breathe heavy. I get onto the farm and not feel like I'm completely depleted of energy.
Yeah.
I don't know how you were feeling.
Well, I mean, I never thought about it for you. It makes a lot of sense. If you came in here and did like a absolute monster of a CrossFit workout, it'd be tough for you to go like do what you need to do physically.
You got to go like do a workout of really heavy deadlifts or something. It's like, oh, now I got to go pick up my heavy chicken tractors and move them, and like, oh, my back's tired, my hamstrings hurt.
Yeah.
So
it's very interesting. I mean, the day before I came out here on the Friday before, it was on Saturday, and we did like a really serious I mean, it was a primer, but I mean, it was a pretty serious workout. I feel like you could never do that in CrossFit and expect to compete at like a high level.
Definitely not. No.
Yeah. I I honestly was surprised. I guess I wasn't surprised at how good we did. I was honestly surprised at how I kept up with you, to be frank. That was like a big driving factor for me in training. I was like, dude, I just cannot let Nate think that I'm like letting him down or something. I will tell you, for me, and then I want to hear your answer to this, by far, without question, the hardest part for me was the burpee broad jumps. And that was the one time during the entire race where I was like, I am like down bad right now. Like, this is really serious. I don't know if you remember, but you had to end up doing like 3/4 of them. Is there a particular part of the sections or part of like a particular workout in High Rocks that you find to be the most difficult?
Honestly, no. And that's always kind of been my case as a CrossFit athlete too. I was never really good at anything, but I was never really bad at anything. I was just right in the middle of everything. And so the same in High Rocks. I'm like, I'm not an outstanding runner. I'm not an outstanding performer on the ergs. I'm not outstanding on the sleds. I'm not outstanding on lunges or burpees. Like, I'm just in the middle on all of it. Not terrible, not great. But it's funny that you say like you didn't want to let me down, because I was getting the same feeling. And it's like there were times where I'm like, frick, like he's big and he's running really fast right now. But then I'm like reminding him like, well, I mean, this guy was a freaking high level athlete, almost pro. Of course he's able to do this well. Like you're able to adapt to these different energy systems very seemingly. And like whenever we were training and we would jump on the rower or jump on the ski, like, because I've spent so long working on these, or anybody that's familiar on these looks at your screen and sees you pulling 2,000 calories, you're pacing 2,000 calories a minute. It's like, not a minute, sorry. Your power output is 2,000 calories. It's like, that's insane. That's insane.
It was fun. I mean, the other thing that I just thought about, because we were talking about this earlier, in CrossFit, you were a bigger guy in the CrossFit circuit. It lends itself positively to smaller people. Like there's a clear advantage. High Rocks is interesting because that's not really the case. It kind of like levels the playing field in that way. Would you agree? Or am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're not wrong. You're wrong in saying I was bigger. Bigger is not the word. Taller.
Taller.
I was much taller. Lankier, which made everything in CrossFit much harder. But yeah, you're onto something there where, like, you know, with all the data that's been gathered over the years of competitive CrossFit, they've found that sweet spot is like a 5'6", or 5'7" male at like 187 pounds. That's like the top 20% that's competing at the games. And, you know, I'm 6'1", like 190. So like you put me and like somebody like Josh Bridges next to one another. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's just like he's much shorter and very, very stacked and stout. Like us doing thrusters head to head, like he's going to beat me by a long shot all day long. Whereas, you know, you get out into High Rocks and you got those taller 6'1", long legs, long femurs. They were able to really, you know, get after it on the run, which, you know, funny enough, like my first couple High Rocks is like, it's really easy to get your head wrapped around the axle of like, oh, I need to get really good at these stations. Like I need to get good on the row. I need to get stronger for the sleds and everything. The whole freaking race is running. Yeah. It's all running. These other things, they're completely meaningless. You just need to get through them without spiking your heart rate like crazy, and you need to be a very good runner. So obviously, as we're seeing the favorites that are starting to really dominate. They're longer, lankier athletes. They're not like jacked with muscle.
Yeah. I got that advice from a friend early on when I told him I was doing High Rocks. He's like, dude, you need to get miles under your feet. Like the rowing, the lunges, all that stuff's great and dandy, but you're running for 45 minutes. Like, yeah, you're doing those things for literally a fourth of the time that you're going to be running. And I think that was really good advice.
Oh yeah.
Really good advice.
Over prepare for the run.
Yeah. Here's a question. So given that you were taller than most CrossFitters, What do you think allowed you to compete at such a high level, given that like that's a pretty clear disadvantage in most cases in CrossFit?
I don't know, just I don't want to say tenacity, but it was just like I was always there.
Yeah.
I was always around. I wasn't giving up. I was doing it year round. I was committed to fucking making it, even if it was for the wrong reasons. I was gonna be there at all the local comps. I was gonna be a little pest, and I was gonna weasel my way onto the podium again. Not because I was the best at anything, but because I wasn't the worst at anything. I was just average across the baseline. Like any comps that I would be on the podium, there was never like a first or a second place that I got in any event, but there was also never a last place. It would be like I got like a 7th, a 5th, a 6th, a 8th, a 4th, and then the way the thing shook out, I would just weasel my way in.
Yeah.
People would kind of be like, "Where the heck did this guy come from?"
That's hilarious. No, I think that, I mean, that I feel like during the High Rocks, maybe it worked both ways, but I was definitely feeding off. I like in the back of my mind, this is why I think it was such a good partner to have in you. Like I knew for a fact that you just like weren't gonna quit. You weren't gonna quit, and you definitely weren't gonna like slacken your effort, which allowed me to sort of piggyback off that. And I think that's ultimately, I mean, we beat our goal by a pretty good good bit. So
I think we did really great.
Yeah, I was pretty pleased.
Well, I think it's just awesome. I don't know how you were feeling with your training. I think another brilliant thing about High Rocks is it just having that thing to train for brings you a little bit more purpose into your training, gets the fire in you. So when you're showing up for your daily training, like you got a reason to be there. You're getting ready for something. I think that's really important, especially for people who have, lost competitive athletics or sports in general. It's like find yourself just kind of like meandering around the gym. You're like, man, like I don't really need to be trying to throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball anymore. Like I'm just gonna like do some sets of bench presses, like go over here, do a few squats or something. But now it's like, okay, I got this thing that I need to be getting ready for. Like I need to put my blinders on.
Yeah, and that's another added benefit of the partner, like having a partner as well, because naturally men in general don't want to let somebody down. It's like for me, getting up early, going to the gym and doing the whatever absolute monster workout that you had written out, I'm like, okay, well, I know for a fact Nate's also doing this right now. So like it gives you that, like, I think that's one of the cool things about High Rocks. Maybe it happens in CrossFit, I'm not sure, but in regular gym life, maybe you have a gym partner that you go to or you go with, but very rarely do men, like you said, that leave competitive sport in high school or college or pro, do they have that thing that they're training with other people for, other than like just for the sake of training. So I found that maybe that's like honestly why I was a godsend when you asked, because I was kind of in that boat where I train pretty functionally, and I actually typically like the way that I train, but there was no purpose behind it. It was very easy for me to be like, I'll just like take today easy or whatnot. But when you have that thing that's on the calendar, this reminds me, my friend Vance, who I've had on the podcast like 3 times, he's a professional fighter. He said, if you want to change your life, book a fight. If you want to change your life, get a fight on the calendar where you're going to be locked inside a ring with somebody and see what happens. It's kind of the same deal, just not in combat.
I mean, he's honestly, he's not lying. I know exactly how that was from when I was boxing in the amateur circuit in LA. It'll really light a fire under you to like really get after your training. And if you're trying to like cut and make weight and everything for that fight, it's like, yeah, you're going to take it seriously because you don't want to be embarrassed in the ring.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed, and I'm curious to hear if you notice it as well. So at the beginning of the High Rocks, like right before when we were like lined up at the start line, the whole heat was there. I don't know how many people on our heat, like 100 maybe or something like that. I noticed, and I know why I did this and why I'm this way, especially prior to those things. I noticed that you and I were probably the most relaxed, calm people there. I don't know if you, from the people that I saw a lot of people like very rowdy, like hyping themselves up, getting their heart rate elevated, like patting each other on the back, saying hype like comments. And I noticed you and I were kind of just in that back corner, just completely chilling. I drew from like baseball experience. I just knew that like whenever I would get super hype, I would perform worse. Is that sort of how you've always been, or is that like an intentional thing that you've like?
I think a lot of it. Well, I think a lot of it probably comes down to like personality styles too. I think naturally you and I are a little bit more reserved and introverted. Like, we're not the rowdy guys, like, getting all amped up and like flexing muscles and all that crap. Like, we kind of view things through a different lens. And so I've also never really liked being in that spotlight. Like, I'm not going to, like, if the race is starting, like you're saying, you and I literally had our hands in our pockets and we were in the back.
Yeah.
And then you got guys like elbow checking each other, getting to the front, like fixing their headbands, taking their shirts off, jumping around and everything and getting all hype. And then there's also that element of like, I think you and I kind of understand on a deeper level that like that adrenaline conservation. Like, I'm not trying to get a massive adrenaline dump 3 minutes before the start line goes. Like, I'm trying to conserve that, stay calm, and just like, I don't know, get into the right mental state. And then also like at the end of it, it's just a fun little competition.
Yeah.
There's no money on the line. Like, we drove over to Houston to like run a race and push ourselves and see what we're capable of, and that's it. Like, we're not out there like competing for money, or we're not gladiators or anything. There's no need to like make it something it's not.
Yeah.
Like, I see so many of these young guys now that are just out there causing a scene and arguing with judges, and like they just make it out like it's this huge deal, when in the grand scheme of things, it's a privilege to be able to go out and do a competition like that, to like have the time to go and do something like that.
Yeah, the physical ability too. I mean, everything.
All of it.
Yeah, that's a lesson. I've been thinking about that a lot, because when I do like these book reviews or conversations or whatnot, when something starts appearing several times, I'm usually, okay, I think God's trying to tell me something. And one of those things is the idea of not taking yourself too seriously. That's come up in some of the books that I've read, like literally 3 or 4 times in the past month and a half. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about. Like, you just simply can't take yourself too seriously. There's no benefit.
So, I mean, what about High Rocks did you say, I am not ever going to do a High Rocks? Is it because you don't do this type of training, you thought that you'd suck at it, and you just didn't want to go out there and do it? Is that why?
I didn't think I'd suck at it, because at Virginia Tech and at VCU, we do like these end of the year things and end of a fall semester where it's like this, basically a team bonding experience where we do like some really, really tough, honestly similar to a High Rocks, where like you're waking up at 5 a.m. and you're running stadiums across the entire Virginia Tech football stadium, and then you're going to do hill sprints, and then you're going to do farmers carry. So it's like these fitness things, and I always did well in those. It was more so probably the former, in that I just like never really trained that way intentionally, and I didn't really have an interest in training that way. And I don't know why, but for some reason when you texted me, I was like, you know what, screw it. Like, I have nothing else to lose. I'm not training for anything particularly right now anyways. It's like, it's not like I was giving something up to do it. It was just a different modality. And in case it's not like glaringly obvious, like, I'm very grateful that I did do it, because it opened my eyes to that style of training. Because it's not, I never did CrossFit. I never really did like circuit workouts. I've always kind of just did the baseball thing where you have a primary movement and then you do secondary movement and then you do a couple sets and you move forward. And then cardio was like this entirely different thing.
And so combining them together with
Yeah.
this foreign concept kind of threw you for a loop. But did you notice any new carryover that you've implemented into your styles of training now that has benefited you in forcing yourself to do something that you would otherwise not do or kind of suck at?
100%. And you texted me like a month before High Rocks or something like that. Maybe it was like 5 weeks. In day 1 to High Rocks, my cardio, like the level of comfort that I felt with the workouts that we were doing. And the interesting thing about cardio is there's never, like, it can always be as hard, because your cardio is only going to get better. So then you can keep pushing yourself, if that makes sense. But week 1 or day 1 versus the actual race, my actual ability to sustain an energy output over the course of an hour, 100% impacted. So I mean, the other thing is like rowing and ski erg. That's not something I ever really did either. I'd kind of just do them like in passing. But those are like, is that because I was good at them?
You could literally tell somebody that you rode crew in college, and they would probably believe you by your performance on a Concept 2 rower. Honestly, like the way that you row is.
It's not meant to be braggadocious at all. That's just the genuine truth. We've talked about this, but in baseball, it's all about, or at least my coaches, which I think they were very good. My training coaches were movement specific to what I was doing, which was pitching, muscle specific to the muscles that we were using and needed to train or lengthen or whatever. It was never really sort of this generic, like base level type of training, if that makes sense. So
Well, because you've built that strong foundation of that mind muscle, you're able to very efficiently move yourself on these aerobic machines.
Yeah.
That balance of power and energy output is so precise that you're able to put out a crap load of power and do it for a very sustained amount of time. Like that's an art form that takes years of practice and that mind muscle connection developing to get down.
That speaks to something. Have you ever heard of what did he call it? I think my friend Noah Ryan, who have you ever spoken to him, or at least you've listened to our podcast together or something?
I've seen him around. He's a big brain dude. I've listened to your podcast with him, and yeah.
He said the term like kinesthetic intelligence or something, like not necessarily mental intellect, but like the ability to manipulate your body and be like aware and use your body effectively. That's something I probably a little bit genetics, maybe more genetics than I would care to give it. But I've just been moving my body in different ways since I was like 3 years old. We talked about it earlier. Like I literally would play every sport I could, any time of the day, moving in different ways. And the other thing is when I don't know what it's called, but like the way that I learn best is by seeing, and then like immediately trying. So like if I saw you do something, you said, hey, take note of how I'm using my feet or like my back. That's the best way that I learn, especially as it relates to like physical movements. Is that similar to you, or like have you found that you just have to like sort of trial
and error? Obviously, seeing something done the right way and then attempting to replicate it is obviously a really great baseline starting point. But yeah, trial and error, like, I don't know, jumping into a pool and swimming like crap and getting out of breath and like flopping and flailing. You're like, okay, that's not kinesthetic intelligence. Like I need to learn about how to like move myself a little bit better here, how to use my energy better, how to position my body better. Trial and error mostly for me. And like injuries have been some of the greatest learning experiences, just because they take you from where you think you know it all. You're capable of moving your body in all these ways, and then now you're incapable of moving in any way possible. Now you got to start back up, kind of learn how your joints and muscle tissue works, how to remobilize, get yourself back into all these correct positions, and then maybe somewhere along the lines you're like, oh wow, like I feel this new thing going on. I feel this new thing firing. I've developed this new position, and now I can move a little bit better.
That's so interesting.
It's like muscle maturity.
I've never thought about it that way, but I had like 3 pretty serious injuries in high school, and 100% after those injuries, I felt more like in control and more aware of my body. So that's a really interesting point.
Sure.
Because like in the physical therapy journey, like as you're repairing, you have to focus on much more specific mind-muscle connection, all those types of things. That's really interesting. I've never thought about that.
Yep.
Would you ever do an Ironman? You mentioned swimming. Would you ever do anything like that, like a triathlon?
I've done triathlons.
Oh, cool.
I performed very, very poorly at the time. Actually, the last time I did a triathlon, I was homeless at the time. It was during a breakup with Ramey. Unfortunately, I was homeless and I was working on a concrete crew in San Diego, and I remember I was wearing a Garmin for my heart rate monitor and everything. I remember coming out of the water, which is the first portion. My heart rate was around 211 or 212, which just peaked
Yeah.
crazy. It's like you're like in a fight with a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
I got onto the bike. My heart rate did nothing but continue to elevate. I finished the triathlon with an average heart rate of like 215.
That's insane.
It just peaked whenever I was swimming. I was just panicked in the water, just straight up gritting my teeth and handlebars on the bike, and then just flatlined it on the run. You know, performed obviously terribly. There's a lot of, there was a lot of elements that went into that triathlon. A lot of unresolved issues, and my body wasn't quite in shape for it. I was very stressed, obviously, going through the breakup with Ramey and whatnot. The circumstances not ideal, which is also a fun thing to look at as a competitive athlete, is like, how pampered do you need everything in order to perform? You know, I was sleeping outside of the job site that we were working on at the time, just sleeping on the sidewalk by a Whole Foods, spending whatever money I had to eat off the hot food bar, peanut butter and jellies and stuff. And then
You were going to Whole Foods when you were sleeping outside?
So the job site that we're working at in San Diego was next door to a Whole Foods. So I would just walk over to the Whole Foods and get my lunch to eat.
That's hilarious. Is that something you did intentionally, like getting at least like healthier options even when it was like hardly possible? Or was that kind of just convenience?
Well, I'll tell you, like the times that you need the most out of your body are like the times that you're at rock bottom and you're grinding through a physically laborious job like that. Like a lot of the guys that I worked with, they would have, you know, the Mexican taco trucks roll up at lunchtime, and all those guys would be just loading up on tacos. And then I'll tell you, from noon to 4, they were pretty much useless. There was not a whole lot of work getting done on that job site. It took them 2.5 hours to digest, and just like by the time they get done, like by the time lunch rolled around, it's like that's about all the productivity you're going to get out of these guys, because 4 o'clock rolls around, they might just be digested and it's like the day's already over. But I guess what I'm getting at is, like, any time that I've been in a rough spot like that, I've prioritized what's going into my body, because I know that I need it to perform and get out of the hole, you know?
I feel like that's so counterintuitive to today's, like the pervading ideology of today. I feel like people are like, you need to, like, there's famous people that are like business guys that you need to eat McDonald's, or you need to eat like the cheapest protein you can find, stuff like that. It's
I mean, there are other ways. Like, people think that if I'm broke, I'm only like, I'm constrained to these cheap McDonald's cheeseburgers. Like, as cliche as it sounds and as cheesy as it sounds, sure, you're going to get that cheap, convenient, quick meal to eat, but that it's not getting you anywhere. Like, it's not getting you out of the situation. It's keeping you in the situation. You need to fuel yourself to a point that will get you out of that situation if you want to get out of it. Like, you know, okay, so here's another time that I was legitimately homeless in Los Angeles. Through observation, there was this cafe called Panini Cafe. It was right next to the fashion school, FITM. All the fashion and designer model girls, skinny model girls, they would go in there and eat. Now, this place was notorious for huge portions. Huge. We're talking like big platter with like chicken or steak kebabs, scrambled eggs, veggies, salads, monstrous, and potatoes. And it was pretty cheap. Anyway, I always would ride my motorcycle by there, and I would see so much of this food just like going in the trash. So I would start going in there to the bar, and I would buy a 75-cent coffee. And then whenever I would see those girls were done, I would like be like, "Hey, are you done with your food?" And I would like toss it in a Tupperware. And I would have a whole backpack full of Tupperware of free food.
That's hilarious.
That was just going to go into the trash. After a while, I did get caught, and Panini Cafe was like, "Hey, you can't come around here anymore."
Just buying a coffee.
Yeah, but it worked for a while.
Yeah. But that's important. I agree with you. The way that I intuitively think about it, I'm like, if there's obviously a level of resilience that needs to be had and like cultivated, but if my body and mind is what's going to get me out of a negative situation that I'm in, and I'm fueling it with complete garbage, it just seems counterintuitive to be able to expect that body and mind then to change or
Yeah.
to operate on like a higher level or a higher frequency. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and then there's also just this element of like, how does it make you feel? Like like most people probably know on a deep level, like eating that quick, convenient thing that you don't have to think about that you can afford right now, like it probably doesn't make you feel the most ideal. Like when you do, like there are certain balances and trade-offs. Like when you go to the supermarket, there are the convenient choices that are going to be marked up in price, but then there are other choices that you're going to have to manipulate a little bit. You know, it's just whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I'm really terrible at giving advice. There's always another option other
Yeah.
than like sitting with what you think that you can afford, you know.
Yeah. I agree. This this is a question. The title of our last podcast, which by the way is like one of my most listened to, and it's gotten a ton of good feedback, which is cool. I titled it "Only the Misfits Have a Chance."
Sure.
Would you consider yourself a misfit?
Absolutely.
Have you always been?
I think so. Yes. I mean, kind of like a black sheep in my family, not necessarily in a bad sense, but you know, with divorced parents, I didn't quite fit in on my dad's side with all the farmers, which is kind of funny given what I do now. But I didn't quite fit in with my dad's side on the farmers. I was like this weak, scrawny, puny, wimpy, you know, city boy that got kind of laughed at, that lived with my mommy. And then on my mom's side, you know, she remarried and kind of like started her own family. And not that not that they didn't include me, but it wasn't my family. It was their family,
Yeah.
and I had kind of excluded myself in a way, and then so I've always just kind of been on the outside like that, black sheep looking in, and I've kind of embraced it at this point, I think.
Yeah, it's worked out well. I think it's interesting because the quote "Only the misfits have a chance." It's when people think of misfits, they might think of like the person in high school who sits by themselves or whatnot. But I really just think it's people who go against conventional wisdom or conventional ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting having read now about Teddy Roosevelt and John D. Rockefeller and Jeff Bezos and Naval Ravikant and all these guys. Jeff Bezos and Sam Walton both have quotes about like directly advising people to go against conventional wisdom, to be a misfit in some way, shape, or form. So I'm curious, do you think it's been like a benefit in your life? Are you grateful that you've kind of been that black sheep looking in?
Yeah, it's a superpower whenever you learn how to use it correctly. Like anything, um, tapping into your differences and figuring out how to use them to your advantage, that's a huge superpower in this world. When the vast majority of population just wants to do everything that they can to fit in and be the same, in a lot of ways, I think that society is much like herd animals. Like, we don't want to stand out as much as we think we want to be like cool and fashionable and different. We don't. We want to jump on the same trends that everybody else is doing. We want to buy the same stocks that all the analysts are recommending to buy because it feels safe and fuzzy, and we're not outcasted. We want to drive the same car as everyone else because everybody's going to accept us. So if you can figure out how to use your differences to your advantage, you're only going to get ahead of the masses. And not to say that like that's the goal, is like constantly being focused on like getting ahead and hustling above everybody, but there's a lot of beautiful things about being different, and I think that people could really benefit from harnessing it and letting it flourish, letting it shine, being more unique and being your own individual.
Yeah. I think what just came to mind when you're speaking is the idea of authenticity and how respect is better than popularity, and people respect authenticity. Popularity is like you said, it's kind of like appeasing the crowd, being popular among the masses, fitting in, or at least being at the top of like the group, which, I mean, status has its perks for sure, but like I think the more valuable of the two is respect, and I think respect is a derivative of authenticity. And you can't be authentic if you're like you said, like sheep. You have, I don't know, 100 sheep on your property right now. If you're always just trying to be like everybody else, I'm curious if, because it's hard. Like, it's very hard. I think people have these like idiosyncrasies, or they might have like this unique perception of themselves, or they might be unique, but it can be difficult to like actually implement that into their lives, or perceive it as an advantage. Did you always look at it as an advantage, or did you have to like sort of work through things to see like, oh wait, like this is who I am, and I'm just going to go ahead and ride with this and trust that it's going to work out?
No, I don't think I've always been like that. Of course, growing up, like I wanted to wear the cool brands that all the cool jocks were wearing, and I wanted to do what they were doing, but I just wasn't. Like, and I came to terms with like I'm not like them. I don't think like them. Like, I don't look like them. I don't like I'm nothing like them. I don't come from a family like them. And so, I don't know, at some point I just stopped trying to be like everyone else. And like I think going through the military, it'll do that too, because you want to be the same as everybody around you. Go to the military, you're exactly the same
Yeah.
as everybody. And then I guess whenever you get out, that's probably whenever I became a real individual, like really started expressing my authentic self. Like, as soon as I got out, like, I'm growing a beard, I'm going to get a mohawk. Just
Yeah.
like, I didn't give a crap. I'd spent so long doing exactly this regimented lifestyle, being exactly uniform with everyone around me, which was good. It instilled a lot of things that I needed in me. But then whenever I got out, I was just going to fully be who I was going to be.
Yeah. And you're willing to live with the consequences, which is,
Yeah.
well, I mean, because like I've had this idea that most people, Naval Ravikant says that when you're young, you should explore, and then you should figure out what you're good at or what you want to do, and then you exploit, not to like other people's detriment. It's just a way to remember it. Explore, and then exploit. I had this idea recently that most people never actually explore. Because if you think about the natural progression of most people, and I'll say young men particularly, because I'm a young man, you grow up, first 5 years, you're getting indoctrinated by your family. Then you go to elementary school, indoctrinated by the elementary school, middle school the same, high school the same, college, indoctrination. Most people go right into a job that's them working for a corporation or some big organization, which further indoctrinates. And there's no time or space for exploration to see what, like, because this is my point, and as it relates to this, if you don't have time or space for exploration, how can you actually figure out or determine or delineate who am I? Like, what do I want to do? Where is it I want to go? Who do I want to be with? If you're constantly indoctrinated, no time to explore. And what I came up with, the reason that is, it's just very strong programming. I think people are literally just programmed, especially in America, that like, this is how you do it. You go to this school, and then you get this job, and then you work until whatever. The other reason is when you don't do that, when you go your own way, or you're a misfit, there's a level of risk that's incurred, like being homeless, or like making zero money, sleeping on your friends' couches, not having nice cars, not having stable jobs, not having the most stable life. And there's risk inherent in that, and I think people are very adverse to that. It sounds to me like you were not.
Well, there's risk. There's inherent risk involved with all of that, but along the way, those experiences really make it very clear to you who you are, what you believe. You build a very strong philosophy about yourself and about the world. I think that nowadays it's very, very, it's not uncommon to ask someone, who are you? What do you like? And be like, well, I'm a I'm a banker. I like to go on cruise ships. It's like, no, who are you? Like, who are you? What do you believe in this world? Like, what is your philosophy? Tell me who you are, like, in here. It's like, because we just haven't taken that time to really explore and ask ourselves really hard questions or experience those things.
That's so interesting. That's kind of convicting because when I was in college, when somebody would ask me like nice to meet you, like I'm Nolan, I would say I'm a college baseball player or I play baseball immediately.
And then what happens when you're no longer a baseball player or you're no longer a banker? It's like you have an identity crisis. You're like, fuck, who am I?
I literally had that.
Yeah.
That I'm not kidding. Like I left VCU and I was like, whoa, like because I thought I was going to play professionally. That didn't happen. I just spent 20 years or 19 years playing this game. It was literally like a core piece of my identity, and it was no longer. And without question, that year and a half, pretty much right before I moved to Austin, and even a little bit after that, it was the hardest time of my life because I was like in the wilderness, figuratively. Like I literally had, I'm like, well, I don't really know what I like to do other than baseball. I've been doing baseball this whole time. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I believe because I haven't really spent time on it. I've just spent time on trying to figure out how to throw 95-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yep.
But in the same vein, without question, the most growth I've ever had in that same period.
So it's like in the process of trying to get a goal of throwing a 95-mile-an-hour fastball and play in the pros and falling up short and losing your identity somewhere along the line, do you come to terms with like, maybe it's not about actually getting to the pros, getting to the goal, getting to the thing. It's about like all this shit that has happened from the moment that I played T-ball to the point that I almost threw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, or maybe I did throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but I didn't get into the pros. All of that shit that I learned along the way has shaped who I am right now, and now I gotta like, now I get to figure out how I use all that to like go a different direction, do something else that I enjoy in life.
Yeah, that you're exactly right. And my whole point with the last little monologue I had with like not exploring is I could have very well after VCU gone and gotten a regular job, but something like I don't even know why. You could ask my brother right now. You could ask my parents. You could literally ask them, and they'll tell you that they just kind of knew that was never the case for me. Something in my heart, like deep in my heart, told me not to do that. And also, I mentioned this to you before, but perhaps like a huge green light, or at least a signal from God. In my last ever meeting with a baseball coach when I was a baseball player, the coach that I respected most in my entire career looked at me and said, "Stay poor as long as you can." And we've talked about this before, but I think that was like the push that I needed to not go get that regular job, sort of go into the wilderness, if that makes sense. And I'm extremely grateful for it. When you think back to the time that you were in the wilderness per se, like the LA, right out of the military, not really sure what's going on or what you're doing, what were some of the things that helped you shape your philosophy?
That's a really good question. Honestly, the fact that I can't answer that really, really well right now tells me that I have some reflecting to do, but I can tell you that looking back on it, no decision seemed like it was made with like a clear plan in front of me. It was like some of the greatest things that happened to me and the greatest things that I did were just out of sheer, I don't want to say desperation, but they were just out of sheer necessity. Like just, I need to make this money so I could pay my rent and make sure I have food. It was just like a checklist of constantly checking Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just constantly being on that grind of checking Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just eventually through that, opportunities started to present themselves. I don't even know how to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Steve Jobs said that the dots will never connect looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. Like you make a decision, there's no way for you to properly tell the fourth and fifth derivative of it. Were you reading a good bit back then as much as you do now?
No, not at all.
Really?
It's just funny how the different stages of my life have progressed. From getting out of the Marine Corps, I would draw. My loft in the city in LA before I met Ramey was filled with art. A good deal of my tattoos on my body were drawn by me. In fact, Ramey just dug out a lot of my old drawings that I drew for her, old sketches. They're right there on the table, and notes that I wrote her. So there was probably about a 3 or 4 year period there where all I did was draw, and a lot of my tattoos on my body just tell the story that I was unwilling to share. And I drew because I didn't know how to talk. I didn't know how to use words. And then somewhere along the lines, I started connecting dots between drawing and my feelings and getting curious about reading, getting more into reading. And then once I got it really into reading, I started really trying my hand at writing and really long form writing. And then taking that long form writing of just long rants working out in my head and trying to short them into like mild poetic utterances over years and years. And somewhere along there, I can't even hardly draw anymore. I tried to pick up and draw something for a note for Ramey for Mother's Day recently. I couldn't draw for crap.
Yeah.
But I wrote her a nice little poem. But I couldn't draw on it.
Yeah.
I was kind of blown away. And then I start to think about the operation out here on the farm and like the choreography of movement of the animals and everything, and like using all of my animals kind of like as a tool in the land as my canvas to like to change things and create. I don't want to say art because that's kind of cheesy, but just that's where my creative energy goes now, is the farm and the rotation of animals, the choreography and the regeneration of the land. So I don't have really a need for drawing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the art thing might sound cheesy, but I would 100% consider an operation like this as like living art. If somebody held like a time lapse over your farm, I mean, can you imagine how cool and like graceful and just the different movements? It's absolutely art, and it's interesting to see the progression. Like, go out of the military. Did you draw in the military at all? There's not much room for creativity in the Marines. Like you said, it's kind of like, here's what you're gonna do it.
Yep, you're right.
And so you have this sort of restriction of artistic expression. You get out and you're like basically scratching because you need to do something creative. You found drawing as a way to sort of begin to reflect on your life and like make sense of your feelings. And honestly, the way that it sounds to me is like that's when you started forming the philosophy, like through the drawing.
That's why I love chatting with you. You're able to like really connect the dots and everything. Yeah, I mean, very well could be.
Because think about it. So if that's when you started creating the philosophy and you started getting the drawing, started thinking about things in a different view, then you got into reading, which is like the next progression. Then you got into writing, it's the next progression, and now you're like progressing into quite literally manipulating land and animals in a creative way as well. Because all this is as well that literally like your operation and like how you live your life, but particularly in reference to the farm, it's all a manifestation of your creative like ideology, like of your philosophy, if that makes sense. Because if you had a different philosophy, you would do things differently with your animals, or you would do things differently with how you interacted with them and things like that.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty cool.
I guess coming full circle, it's like the health of my body and mind was always priority in the city. No matter how much money I had, like I knew I needed to take care of that. Even, first things first, getting out of the Marine Corps and just being a purely functioning alcoholic, and then coming to terms with like, hey, this is not really doing much for me. Like, I need to cut this out if I want to change my state, if I want to change my condition. So cutting out the booze was, a huge fulcrum to getting healthier, getting more clear-headed about what I wanted to get out of my life and not just stagnating. And then just through the years and years and years living in the city of like trying to become the healthiest version of myself, seeking out all the healthiest meats and farmers markets and everything, like I wind up out here, and now I'm starting to understand that my health is, directly tied to the health of the food that I'm raising, and their health is directly tied to the health of the stuff that they're standing on and eating. And so my health is now tied all the way directly back to the soil.
And the
So
people that then eat those animals, like your wife and daughter and friends and
exactly.
all that stuff.
And so then now I'm like, I'm using my health, I'm using my fitness to raise these animals in a healthy way to improve the health of the soil so that it continue bringing health and nourishment to myself and my family and friends that I care about. That's fun. And then
Pretty cool.
having my friends and family and everything come out and interact with them and experience it with me is also a lot of fun.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to what we're talking about with like the moving out here. When you guys were in LA, and Ramey's like, this is gonna be odd. Like I'm moving from literally like the heart of the whole like influencer content creation health culture to literally the middle of middle of Central Texas. But then you guys found that like people really resonated with that, and I'm sure you see that when people come out here. Everybody that comes out here is probably like, this is so cool. Like just to be able to interact with animals, be away from the city. It's not something that people get to do on a regular basis in mass. Like most people don't get to do that. So that's a really cool thing to think about. Like your health and your philosophy is manifest in this land, which then goes back and influences your daughter, your wife, your friends, the land itself. It's pretty cool. When you were in LA, you were the guy. I think I've seen a video of you just like shooting your bow across the street in like your downtown LA neighborhood, and you guys had chickens and all this type of stuff. Was that like? I'm assuming that wasn't the norm. I'm assuming that was like kind of like, what the hell is this weird guy doing?
No, it's definitely not the norm. We're kind of referred to as like the Beverly Hillbillies. Um, we had some people in the neighborhood that were very cool about it. Like they would like come over and like watch the chickens out on the yard whenever I would let them out in the evening to like wander the yard and forage for bugs and whatnot a little bit before they would go up to roost at night. But then there were some people just very hardcore rule followers, like, you're definitely not supposed to be doing this, that just couldn't get over the idea that there was a family that was raising their own food. And so we started getting into some trouble about that. It is what it is. We outgrew, I'll say that we outgrew the living condition that we're in. And we're also coming to the realization that while Southern California is incredible, there's no doubt about it. The weather's incredible. Just everything about it's incredible. I don't want to say everything's about it's incredible, but it's really awesome until it isn't. And what I mean by that is like the quality of living was just getting to a point where it wasn't really matching what was required financially to live there.
Yeah.
And especially whenever we were starting to talk about raising a family, we knew that we just wanted something with a little bit of space. And I had maxed out my potential and my capabilities for growing food there. Like I was starting to produce eggs. And then I was also had like a little raised bed garden set up where we're growing berries and tomatoes and zucchini and like kale and spinach and everything. And so I was really starting to get this itch. I was getting an itch to grow my own food. And so we wanted to get somewhere where we had a little bit of space where we could have our family, grow our own food, have a little bit of freedom, which, came with its pushback at first, especially with Ramey being a content creator. She's kind of like, oh man, like I need to live this type of life, this interesting type of life in the city, like doing fun city things for people to like follow along for content purposes. But it's actually the polar opposite. What people are really, really being drawn to right now is this like homesteading, agrarian lifestyle. It's like it's really cool to see this, like see the social view becoming very optimistic about farming.
Yeah, it's like it's cool for multiple reasons, but namely because then when people focus on something, they want it to improve. Like they want people to we were talking about how Will Harris is in the White House. Like I don't know when the last time a regenerative rancher's been in the White House to talk about that type of stuff, but it is very cool. When you were in LA, like was there an impetus or like a moment, even maybe when you were homeless or like in the Marines, or maybe it was when you were growing up, that you like knew that you wanted to raise your own food in some capacity? or was that sort of like a sort of moment, like heat of the moment thing?
No, it 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 progressively started happening by, you know, getting chickens, feeding those chickens, getting my own eggs, using the chickens manure to fertilize my soil, growing my own produce, feeding those scraps back to the chickens to eat that will give me eggs, and then using that same chicken manure to cycle back into the soil to fertilize so that I could grow more produce. That's the moment where I was like, whoa. And we're talking like very baseline understanding.
Yeah.
That like a very baseline understanding started happening for me right there, where I'm like, whoa, there's plants, there's animals, there's soil, I'm growing food. Like I want to do this. I want to do this bigger. Like I want to grow our own food. Like I'm already, I don't know. I haven't quite figured out how to articulate it, but you know, guys like us, we go into a freaking gym, we spend all this freaking energy, like on a bike or a rower, we're like spending all this energy, we're lifting all these things, and then we get out of the gym, and what do? What do we need to do after we get done in the gym?
Eat.
We need to freaking eat. So then I gotta get in my car and drive to the grocery store, and I gotta go buy my food, and I gotta eat it. And I can get as close as I can to my food, and that's great. But then I'm like, I want to use all, like, instead of using all this energy in here, like I want to use it out there and use it to make my food anyways. You know,
And make it better too.
sense.
Yeah, it does.
Make it better.
Well, it's cool. We just ate peaches.
Yeah.
You said you wanted to do it better or bigger.
Yeah.
And we literally just ate peaches that were fertilized by your sheep.
By my sheep poop.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How long ago did you start doing the chickens?
The chickens?
Yeah, like in LA.
Oh. It's funny. About 5 years ago, because so Raimi used to post like day in the life blogs on her YouTube, and so she had a day in the life vlog 5 years ago that we went and watched back. It was a day in the life
That's
of
cool.
like Nate and Raimi in the city. Like, what did that look like? It was really funny. I cringed my face off because like I was on camera talking. It was like 5 in the morning. And I was like drinking coffee and like I was like showing off our schedule, our daily schedules. Like, guys, this is what we're doing. We really like to boost productivity at these times. I'm like, boost productivity? God, I feel like I sound like such a tool. I'm like, gosh. But that was like the hustle mentality that I was in at that time. And like, we were like ripping around on my motorcycle, changing out Airbnb or like flipping an Airbnb that we rented out and like working on the computers, pecking at a keyboard, and then like building a chicken coop, and like it was fun to watch.
Does your, well, first off, there's this idea that I love. If you don't think yourself from 3 years ago is an idiot, you're still an idiot.
I think that's Elaine
De Baton or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I know you're talking about. Is that him?
He said something like that. Yeah,
I think
like,
it's true. Like
yeah.
I look back at myself in high school and college. I'm like there's moments of, like you said, like severe cringiness. But I'm curious, after hearing about that, so it sounds like you were working on raising your own animals, you were doing fitness, you were training, were you guys doing the homebodies then or no?
I think we had just started homebodies. Yeah.
So you're doing homebodies and you're like training yourself. You're working on your motorcycle. How much has your like day-to-day changed? Because it sounds like it's like just on a grander scale.
Yeah, it's got its similarities and it's got its differences. I mean, I would say that my temperament and my demeanor has changed a lot since living out here. I mean, I know that like even blood work tests have shown that like this type of environment has been wildly more beneficial to my overall health. You know, in the city, obviously don't want to brag, but I was fit as hell.
Yeah.
Competing. But I was not. I wouldn't say I was healthier.
You were fit, not healthier?
My blood pressure was through the roof all the time. Like I used to be able to just feel my blood pressure like in my eyes, just from just constantly ripping around the city on a motorcycle, just white knuckling, just pretty unpleasant dude, really.
What factors about out here do you think it is?
A lot, really. I mean, it's the rolling hills, it's the landscape, it's the quiet, it's the not constantly dealing with the overcrowded, everyone around you, the stimulation, especially like you got to remember, like coming out of the military, you're just kind of trained to be a little bit more observant, whether you acknowledge it or not. You're observant of everything around you, and so when you have all this stimulus right in front of you, you're taking it all in. I don't have that out here. I've got rolling hills. I mean, I'm taking in all my animals and livestock, but it's not this like in this like frantic manner, you know.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Do you see a lot of that? Like, I'm assuming it's pretty beneficial for a lot of people in the military to get out, like, in this type of environment.
Yeah, it's wildly beneficial, I'll say. Metropolitan areas, they have their pros and their cons, you know. It's wildly beneficial for the opportunities that it provides. Like, I wouldn't be able to be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for years of hustling in the city. Hustling in the city is what was able to get us here, grinding. And, you know, I was able to work, 5, sometimes 6 jobs at a freaking time in the city. Like, I could have a handful of personal training clients. I could be a boxing instructor at Google. I could be coaching TRX classes at a yoga studio. I could be stripping at night. I could be roller skating dogs during the day.
Isn't that how you met Ramey?
Yeah, I was training and roller skating dogs at the time. So like you could really get by in the city like that.
See, that's what I mean by like when I say the Misfit thing. Like, that's insane. Have you ever thought about like how working 5 jobs at the same time, roller skating dogs?
And all of these things just came out. All of these things really just came out of necessity. Like roller skating dogs was like I had a Belgian Malinois that was super hyped up, and I got compound stress fractures in my shins from competing in CrossFit, and I couldn't walk my dogs, and so I needed to find another avenue. I used to play hockey. I was pretty suck ass at it, but I could skate.
Yeah.
And so I bought a pair of $60 roller skates off Craigslist and started skating dogs. And then what do you know? Like, people would come up to me on the sidewalk and be like, "Oh my gosh, I have a Siberian Husky at home. He is out of control. I've got an Aussie Shepherd, out of control with energy. Like, what would you charge to skate him? This is brilliant." And so I started racking up clients just skating their dogs in the afternoon. It was really awesome. I had a really good time with it. And then, like, I filled up my loft with dogs that I was training, and, I look back at it and like I was hardly training these dogs. Sure, these dogs were coming back like wildly more obedient and stuff. I was really just hanging out with them.
Just making
Like,
them tired.
I don't know, but like these people would give me their dogs, and like I would honestly just hang out with them. I would roller skate them. I would take them on walks, take them to the coffee shops, like work on their commands a little bit, sit down, heel. And I think they just wanted to like hang out, and they were better dogs because they were hanging out instead of like sitting in their kennel while their owner was at work. But and then all that to say, like I had, my loft filled up with dogs, and just out of nowhere, I get approached by this really handsome, like Latin dude, like, because I'm this grungy looking dude. And so he was the manager for a male stripper company. And he like approaches me. He's like, "Dude, we are looking for somebody just like you. Like, we need this like rugged bad boy to like fill our acts. Like, are you available? Here's a card, whatever."
And
then bam, I was
that
like,
works out.
I got dogs to feed.
Yeah.
I can make a bunch of cash and buy dog food to feed my dogs. I don't do anything on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night anyways. Like, might as well
Make some money.
make some cash. So yeah.
That's so, I mean, it really speaks to the idea that like the dots can't connect looking forward. Like, you kind of just have to take opportunities one at a time. That's pretty crazy.
Yep.
I had something on the tip of my tongue, and now I'm forgetting it. You mentioned dogs. Oh, animals. It sounds like, have you always loved animals? Because I kind of knew that you were like really good with dogs earlier, but I didn't realize they were that big a part of your life. And now here you are with hundreds of animals.
Honestly, I don't know if they were. I don't know. I was just more naturally drawn to animals than than humans, really, I guess. And I don't know, a lot of those dogs that I was working with, they were, what do you know, misfits in themselves. Like
Yeah.
my dog Chapo, all the dogs that I kept as my personal dogs, they were all misfits that had been thrown into the shelters. They were aggressive dogs that like just were misunderstood or just were found themselves in not the most ideal circumstances, and so they get tossed into a shelter, and those wound up being my favorite dogs.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah.
When you look back at the time, like when you did start reading or like looking into philosophy or whatnot, are there any books that immediately like changed something, or like the philosophy that was relayed in a particular book or whatever, or an author that struck you as like, this guy really, really, like, I had an aha moment?
Honestly, no, not really. I started picking up books based out of like sheer curiosity, and I would say that a lot of it started with reading like military type psychology, so like the classic On Killing. Like I wanted to read the psychology of like, combat veterans and what the heck's going wrong with us and why it is the way that it is, and like understanding our present human condition. And somewhere along there I started getting getting more of an appreciation to like more more poetic explanations to like the human condition, philosophy, psychology. So like bridging, I don't know, maybe sort of into Robert Greene, or very early on. Like I really enjoyed the way that Robert Greene was able to like explain very difficult things in a very elementary level, and then bridging into Jordan Peterson, and then I don't know, Jordan Peterson mentioned something about Emerson or Thoreau, and I'm like, who the heck are these guys? I'm gonna go look into them. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, they're very similar to me. Wow, these guys are contrarians. They go against the herd. Cool, I like them. They're all about individuality and authenticity, and like, cool. I'm gonna get into these guys. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you know much about Teddy Roosevelt? If not,
Just the
I gotta give you a
constant.
book.
I was gonna say just the constant quotes and tidbits of information you're constantly throwing at me. Like, oh, that sounds like something Teddy Roosevelt would
I
say.
absolutely love Teddy Roosevelt. He's 100% a role model. And it's funny how, like, there's this idea that David Sinner on the Founders podcast talks about, like, how true interest is revealed at a young age. And I think about I remember so vividly my dad reading The Rise of Teddy Roosevelt when I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. I didn't even read like but 2 pages of the book, and it was about this particular hunt that Teddy Roosevelt went on in the Badlands, where he killed like 147 animals in like 2 days or 3 days, something like that. It was like an insane hunt. But all that to say, I love Teddy Roosevelt, and funny enough, the first book podcast that I ever did, like book highlight, was that exact same book.
Of
But
course.
the reason I brought him up is he was like a strong romantic believer in the power of like the individual, of a human being able to like break chains and like cases that they were in, and like really be able to become something, which I think is cool. I think you would like reading about him.
Fully express themselves. I mean,
Yeah.
he probably saw some correlation there to like healthy individuals, like fully expressing themselves leads to a healthier and more productive society in general. Really.
Yeah, 100%. Have you ever read the Strenuous Life speech that he gave? I'll have to send you all these, because these are like his life philosophy. I think is just like one of the most insane life philosophies I've ever seen. I mean, he practically lived like 10 lives in 60 years. But he was all about, like you said, strenuous life. He if you were not working and working hard at something, he thought you were just like a waste to society, which I find to be interesting.
I mean, there's certainly, I think, some benefit to that philosophy, some truth to it for sure.
When you look back at that time, like, I'll say the wilderness just because that's the word I already used, but like the time after the military to, I guess, whenever you feel like you were out of the wilderness, what do you look back on that with? Like, is it a time that you're fond of, sort of indifferent of? Is there like a gratitude, or like, what do you look back on it with?
It's interesting because those were my most transformative years, and man, I don't know if it's all just hitting me at once now that I'm a dad and I'm old, and like maybe I just have this deep rooted fear of like being washed up. Like, not that I was ever anything to begin with, but just, yeah, I look back at those times and I'm like, while they were they were kind of like suck ass at the moment, it was like there's something really refreshing about like that just constant state of survival. It's like there was a lot less on my plate. It's like now I'm like, not that it's a bad thing. It's just a different chapter in my life. But it's like now I'm balancing being a father and a husband, and running the farm and like all the things that come with a family, like trusts and taxes and
Yeah.
all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Not to say that that's bad, but like looking back at those times, it was just me and a motorcycle, and I was just getting by, and like I thought that I had a lot more belief in myself. Maybe now I'm like getting old in my age, and I'm like grabbing heavy machinery around here. I'm like, man, that's really heavy. Like whenever I look back at those times, I never picked up anything that was like, oh, that's
Too
hard.
heavy. Yeah.
So it's like these things are starting to hit me, and it's kind of cathartic. Sometimes I get nostalgic feelings, especially like when I jump on my motorcycle and I go for a ride. It's like there are different thoughts going through my head now too. It's like I used to ride just lawless. Like if I hit something, crash and die, who cares? That's what happens.
Yeah.
But it's like now I've got a daughter. It's like I gotta be smart. I gotta be alert. I gotta be aware. I gotta wear a helmet.
No, you didn't used to wear a helmet.
I mean, I wouldn't before, no. But
That's
I don't know. It's aging is interesting.
yeah.
Say
It's
that.
it's there's this. Have you ever heard of The Way of the Superior Man, the book by David Data?
Sounds very familiar.
It's a good book. He talks about the one section that really stood out to me is the idea of, he talks about purpose and how similar to what we're talking about with like the military or for baseball for me, that we think that purpose is this like, it's a stagnant, singular thing. Like we think, oh, like this is my life's purpose. That means I have to do this for the rest of my life. His idea is that a man has many different purposes throughout their life.
Yeah.
And each time you get stripped of a lower purpose, you go through a period of wilderness and uncertainty while you're figuring out what the next purpose is. And then you enter into that next season of like whatever that purpose is the next season. And then at some point, that's going to, like, say you raise a family, at some point your kids are going to be gone. And then your purpose is not going to be like the dad in that way. And then you have to strip that and so on. And I found that to be really comforting because he was like putting words into my experience after baseball where like I had this purpose, it was stripped, and then I was in the wilderness. But if you just keep moving and keep trying things and keep exploring, your next purpose will be revealed to you, and then you dive into that and so on.
It's funny, something just clicked off where it's like you're explaining it as wilderness, and I think that this is like a big connection for a lot of males. Right now you could be in the wilderness, essentially, like metaphorically speaking. Right now I'm in the cave. I'm secure in my cave with my family. Mm-hmm. My job is to protect and provide for my family in my secure cave. When I look back at those times, like I was a raper, pillager, plundering, like scavenger, like, running through, trying to find a mate, killing an animal, like just wild, just doing whatever I had to. And now I'm in a different chapter of my life, and I've like shed that wild man about me, and I'm civilized. And so I don't know, maybe this is going to come full circle. Here we are. And maybe that's why I find myself compelled to like train with Nolan, do a high rocks with Nolan, because it's like I feel this urge to like prove that I can still come out of the cave.
Yeah.
I can still
be the warrior. Yeah, like you're the king, but you could still be the warrior.
I don't know.
There's another book that I love, written by a guy named John Eldridge, but he talks about there's 4 stages in a man's life. There's like, I think the first one is cowboy, where you're like pretty much exploring, sort of what we talked about. Then you're the warrior, which means you're fighting for something. That could be survival, that could be for an idea, that could be for a group of people, whatever it is. then you become a king, which is the leader of warriors. And then after you become a king, you become a sage, which is the advisor to the kings. And I like that idea of the progression. Because, I mean, as you just said, you can kind of already see that in your life. I'm probably, I don't know, maybe I'm in the warrior stage. But it's interesting to have these sort of paradigms to look through them, through the different seasons of life.
I couldn't agree more.
The reason the wilderness thing to me is so important, and I find myself juggling this internally because my life at this point, just objectively, it's not like I've accomplished anything of any magnitude really. Like I'm not a father or a husband. I'm not wealthy. I'm not like some expert in any field. So I guess the way I sort of like struggle with that because I'm like, well, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I'm literally hedging my life on this bet. Like I'm betting my life that this is true, that you literally have to enter the wilderness at some point. And it's the how do I've never like articulated this. You at some point in your life you will be in the wilderness, but and there's two ways you can go. The first is a choice in which you can choose when you enter the wilderness and like how you do that. The second is when the wilderness is brought upon you because you never went through it yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the first time I've ever really explained that. But I really do believe that there's power in those seasons of like, holy shit, what do I do? Like I maybe what I have to do right now is go get another job or go figure out a way to pay for rent or go figure out a way to roller skate these dogs or whatever it is, or find a couch to sleep on.
Well,
I found those.
Your life is peeled back to the most basic principles. It's actually very, I've said this. I've said this before that like sometimes there were elements of combat that were just so like your life is just so simple. There's no noise. As crazy as that sounds, there's no excess noise. Like it's just you're like peeled down to the most simple, basic necessity: survive. And then like what you're talking about is like you get to these points in the wilderness, you peel back all of the most fundamental things, and it's like I just need to focus on these singular things. Like what am I going to do? And maybe it's like it gets quiet enough for you to actually hear yourself think and like come to terms with like, what do I find important? Like, what do I value? Most people don't even know what the heck they value.
Yeah.
What's important to them and why? That's another thing that it's like very directly tied to your identity. You got to like get to that point where you're like forced to confront like, who am I? What do I value? And why am I going to do this?
Yeah. I mean, the military thing, I can totally see that being real. I've obviously never served in the military, but like you're so right. You're literally like, you're not worried about like, what's happening in the stock market or what's happening in the baseball game or like what you're going to do for training tomorrow.
Nope.
You're literally like, I know that I and my teammates need to survive, and that's literally it.
Bam.
Everything else is complete eyewash.
Yep.
There's definitely the other thing that I think about, and this is just my own personal experience, like I've never technically been homeless, but like I've slept on couches and floors for several months at a time. There's a level of resilience and like confidence that gives me in knowing that like it's not that bad. You know what I mean? Like it's not ideal by any means sleeping on my brother's literal hardwood floor, but I know that I did that and I was still like a relatively joyful person. Like I didn't like hate myself entirely. I was like a functioning member of society. It wasn't like the end all be all. Do you feel that like sort of resilience that created in you, like knowing that you went through that and now here you are?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's face it. The reason why Los Angeles is just so ripe with homeless is because the weather is just so perfect. So getting out of the Marine Corps where we'd spend months and months and months on end sleeping in dirt holes and living in the field, like going out to frickin' Venice Beach and being homeless, not so bad. There was a shower. There was a free shower right there on the boardwalk that I could use to stay clean. I could get a very cheap membership, a very cheap gym membership to Gold's Gym, have access to be able to brush my teeth and everything. Being homeless was not terribly bad.
Go ahead.
I completely get what you're saying. A lot of people just have they've got a safety net right there that's always there, and so they never actually experience like what it would be like to, like, I don't know, be homeless or, you know, lose it all. And then whenever you do lose it all, you're like, it's actually not that bad. Like, you might have that initial shock of like, oh my god, this is so different, but it's not that bad. If you can get food and have shelter and be safe enough, like, it's not that bad. And then there's that level of like self-respect that comes from it, or like just self-confidence that comes out of it. Like, oh, I can do this. I could do anything. I can get through this.
Yeah, I agree completely. What you just said that reminded me of something is the idea that there's no need for faith in sterile environments. Like, the only environment that you would need faith in, obviously there's nuance, but is the wilderness, when things are uncertain. And like, from a tribal perspective, American Indians, for example, they were very spiritual beings. They believed in like sort of appeasing the powers that be, because when you're in a prairie and your entire tribe's survivalhood depends on whether or not there's like bison on over the next ridge, you kind of have to have faith that there is. If you don't have faith that there is, then there's no reason to go over that next ridge. Does that make sense? Whereas like, if you're in downtown LA or downtown Atlanta or Austin, where every meal is literally a minute away, all it costs is $10, there's no real immediate danger or anything like that, there's not as much need for like faith in faith that things will work out. And so I think going through periods, intentional or unintentional, of like immense uncertainty, I think that strengthens our ability to believe that things will work out, if that makes sense.
100%. I mean, if you're in a sterile environment where everything's promised for you, like, faith, what is faith? You don't ever even recognize that it exists. It never establishes for you, because you don't need to have faith in anything, because it's all there. It's all right there for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally understand.
You mentioned like sort of the next season, like you're in the cave now with your wife and now daughter. I'm curious, the last time we spoke, I believe, was March of 2024. So Raimi was pregnant, but you guys weren't a father. How has becoming a father changed like your perception of the world, or maybe like your life? That might be a broad question, but I'm just curious if there's like anything that stands out.
It is a very broad question. You know, honestly, she's 9 months now. First 5-6 months, babies are a vegetable, man. Really, they are. Eat, poop, pee, sleep not much, cry, go straight to mom. And then, you know, as a dad, my primary job is just showing up as a husband. Yes, I'm, you know, doing as much as I can with my daughter, but more so the way that I'm showing up is showing up to help my wife as much as possible. Right now, I'll say that she's really starting to crack out of her shell. Her personality's coming out. She's starting to interact with me more. She's getting more anticipation to do things with me. And so I'm only just now really starting to feel a little bit more with her. Maybe, I'll certainly say that I understand now why. Do you know anybody that sends voice memos instead of text messages? I understand now why certain people send voice memos.
Why is that?
Because if I have to text something longer than like 3 or 4 words, like, I'm sending voice memos, just because it's constant. You're like constantly on. You're constantly juggling, like, how much shit can I get done in this 45-minute nap window that my daughter is sleeping in, which I also have to spend another 30 minutes getting her to fall asleep for that 45-minute nap window. And then it's like, it's kind of like that. I'm not really answering your question much about fatherhood, but I will say that what I've really gathered is that it's more so about she makes very ordinary moments, like very special and extraordinary, if that makes sense. It's like, it's the silliest little things, just like sitting down at breakfast and like she'll be doing this new like hand gesture or making a new noise or just like wave at me. It's like that makes the morning breakfast and coffee like very special. Or like whenever we're going out to take care of the chickens and collect eggs in the morning, like she'll sit on my lap and she'll grab the steering wheel and like help me steer the buggy, and she'll like start throwing her hands in the air, and like, and then obviously the wife is along too, and it's just like that makes that whole moment even more special, you know.
That's cool. It's
Yeah.
like it makes like what would be mundane almost like a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So that's really all I've really grasped with it so far.
Are there Here's a question, and don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but maybe this would be cool. I'll add a little bit of context. What I decided I'm going to do, where I'm going on a family vacation later this summer. During that vacation, I'm going to record a multiple-hour podcast with each member of my family that will only be available to my family, with the hopes that my brother's children will be able to listen to him when they're 29 or 30, the age that he is now. They'll be able to listen to him when he was in that same age, and then their children. So my brother's grandchildren will be able to listen to him, learn about what he was like, what he was doing, what he hopes to be doing, what he hopes to be remembered for, etc. So with that context, how do you like? Have you thought about how you hope to be remembered as a dad to Opie? Like, is there like a framework that you think about that through?
That's really interesting. And first and foremost, I think it's a really cool idea, that given the technology that we have now, and like how cool would that be to be able to look back on? Like I couldn't do that with my parents. And like, I think that would be really cool to like hear these sorts of things years and years down the road. I mean, I will say that I recently bought Raimi a scrapbook for her to like keep memories in, because as a mom, she's grown much more sentimental. And so what was funny is that she's been seeing me reading all these letters. So recently I've been on a kick of reading love letters. So like letters between Franz Kafka and Milena, or Felice, or Fitzgerald and his wife, Jean-Paul Sartre and his wife. And I'm also reading the love letters between Sigmund Freud and, oh my God, why am I drawing Salam, Lou Andreas Salam, who Lou Andreas Salam was like a muse between Sigmund Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Rainer Maria Rilke. Wow. So three of like the most powerful like intellectual poets, psychologists, they were all madly in love with this woman. I'm like, that's fascinating.
That's
like,
insane.
I want to read their love letters. All this to say, when Raimi saw me doing this, she went and drug out all the love letters that I've ever written her, which is pretty thick, hefty stack. And so she started making a book out of it. And she's like, I want Opie to read this. Like, I want Opie to read our love story, like, of these love letters that you wrote me all the way up until now. And so I guess I'll be happy for her to see that, and hopefully she'll take from that, like, the love that I have for her mother is something that she should expect from a man. And yeah, because man, having a daughter, you don't really think about it, but it's like when you have a daughter, you start to view the world as like, you just want him to end. It's a long way down the road, but you want him to end up with a good man. It's like, how do I define a good man, and how do I make sure that she ends up with a good man? Like, I guess I need to really replicate that for her. I need to show her what that looks like.
That's powerful. That brings a couple things to mind. Number one, maybe you can now relate to this. My dad would always tell me when I was younger that you will never understand until you have your own.
Yeah.
He was like, I can tell you how much I love you. I can tell you how much I love your mom, but you will never understand until you have your own. I'm guessing that you can now see the truth in that.
Yeah, definitely.
The letter thing is very cool. I
Yeah.
think that'll be sweet.
Yeah. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of interesting too because it, as Raimi said, like the love letters that she began getting were from me as a dirty, grungy street kid artist, and like I would put little doodles on them.
Yeah.
Like I would draw on them, and then I would write mildly poetic utterances in there, but they were very just laced with profanities and like just not very good. And over time, over the years, it's just I've become a little bit more polished, a little bit more articulate with my writing, and it's a little bit more nice to read.
Yeah, that'll be cool for you and her to read, like in down the line as well.
Yeah.
It reminds me your comment about like showing Opie the type of man that you want her to be with. If I had to pick one quote, probably a quote that's not biblical or like out of the Bible, one non-biblical quote that I think is the most powerful quote of my life. It's by Saint Francis of Assisi. He said, "Preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words." Which reminds me of the idea of like what you say or what you do speaks so loud that people don't hear what you say. Because it would be so much easier for any father, but you in particular, given we're having a conversation, to be like, yeah, this is what you should look for. This is what you should look for. This is what you should look for. This is what he should do. This is what you should do. But the number one informer of her choice later in life will be your actions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh man, like these kids, like they're so observant. They're taking it in. I can see it on her face every morning whenever we go out. She's just taking everything in. Her mind, her brain, everything is just developing and flourishing a mile a minute. Like she's watching everything. Like I come into the kitchen, I start filling up my water, grabbing stuff. She's like, she sees everything. She's watching. She's like learning. And so like no doubt she's going to see how Raimi and I are interacting and the love that we have, the connection that we have, the respect that we do or do not show or have for each other. So yeah, it's going to be important going forward to like show her like what a man should look like in her life.
It's like an accountability partner, almost.
Kind of, yeah.
Like
yeah.
I could see that being a pretty strong paradigm shift for decision making. Like, you know, I mean, it'd be easy to make a decision as a single, unmarried, no children man. Like you were saying, actually, with the bike. Like you can make a decision. It's like, oh, whatever, who cares? But then
that decision only affects me
at
that time. But now my decisions affect
a lot of people. So it's like you got to really start thinking about these decisions in a different light.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Is it cool to see her? Like, I feel like, I mean, I don't know anybody. Actually, that's not true. I know a couple people off the top of my head that are like raising their family in this type of environment. Is it cool to see her like interact with like the land and the animals, and like has she like interacted with the baby lamb yet? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. You'll see she'll be like strapped to Raimi's chest in a harness, and Raimi will come out with a bottle to like bottle feed our lamb, and she's just like sitting there with her head right there in the mix where they're bottle feeding the lamb. Or like, you know, whenever we're collecting eggs up in the morning, like I'll give her an egg and she'll grip it and hold it, and I'll say, don't drop it, and she'll hold on to it. She won't squeeze it too hard where she breaks it, but she'll hold on to it and won't drop it. Yeah, it's really fun, and like you said, a lot more fulfilling having her along, experience and everything. You know, having a kid is like you get to experience all of these things through a whole new light. So it's like all of these activities and things that we're doing now that she's doing it, like I'm experiencing it totally different because I'm getting to see her experience it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
You can just like see it through her eyes as her like with her response.
Kind of, yeah. So
there's that childlike curiosity too. Like you said, she's literally curious about everything.
You know, and I'll tell you something. Recently, I've started becoming a little bit more acutely aware of like how much I lack in terms of my intelligence, I'll say, in my inability to explain things in a very basic manner. And I'll explain, like, whenever we have younger kids coming out here, maybe like they're in the curiosity phase, the questioning phase, the 5s to the 9s, and they're like, they're like, what's that? Like, I'll give you a perfect example, actually. So my two horses were standing here at the fence line, and this little boy and his sister, like 5, 6 years old, they were petting the horses, and they were petting Tilly, and Rolo kind of like backs away. And he was like, why does she let us pet her and he doesn't? And I was like, oh, he's friendly. He's got a different personality. And the little boy's like, what's personality? I'm like, God, like,
This is deep.
what a good question.
I don't know.
I'm like, well, I guess personality is like the way that he views the world, like his attitude, his perception of you and where he is and his attitude. Well, what's attitude? I'm like, man, like, you're relentless, kid. I was like,
That
well,
was literally me.
I'm like, well, like, just his history and his life experience. Like, he grew up a certain way where he had like really rough cowboy handlers with him. So he's happy now, but like, he just likes a little bit more distance. And so that's just, that sort of stuff is a reminder to me, like, Ophelia is not far behind that. She's going to be asking me like, why is the grass green? Why is there a hump on that cow? Why is the fence like this? And I don't know. Like, it's pushing me to like understand things on a little bit deeper level so that I can, I don't know, I could be there to help her in her curiosity journey.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the beauty of, for me, like the podcast or writing is another great thing. Somebody said, it might've been Peterson, I'm not sure, but somebody said like writing is the act of thinking or something. Like something like that. And my point is, the way that I have found that I formulate ideas, I love what you said. Like you said something about like creating your philosophy or like forming your philosophy. How I've formed my philosophy is by thinking about things and then speaking them, like articulating them in conversation or writing about them. And so I think that's a really powerful. It's almost like your daughter is like that for you, because you're at some point, like you said, you're gonna have to figure out how to answer some pretty hard questions from her, and they might be from like a 5-year-old, but they might be like legitimately important questions.
Yep.
Which is good. On that note, we're about 1 hour and 40 in. I have a question that I was asked by Harry Gray on my podcast on my 100th Q&A.
Love Harry.
He's a great guy. 100th episode Q&A. He asked me what would my 80-year-old self be proud about my first 100 episodes. I've changed that question, and I'll say this, one of the beautiful things of the podcast is like creating space and time and the environment for people to like think about things. My hope and goal as like a conversationalist is to be able to evoke some level of like some new synapses in your brain, like some new connection. And so I'll ask this question with that in mind. What do you think 80-year-old Nate would be proud of current Nate for?
I would say probably the connection that I've begun. I say begun because I've only just begun to scratch the surface. The connection that I've begun to form with the earth and Mother Nature, because I think that that's going to have long-lasting and long-reaching benefits across everything for the rest of my life. I think it's going to be really, really powerful, and it's going to be something that I look back on just the same way that I look back now at like my very transformative years where I was roughing it in the wild. I'm going to look back at these times now where I'm really starting to see the light bulbs starting to go off in this whole farming journey and this like spiritual fulfillment that it brings. And I'm going to look back at this time and I'm going to see that it's only just the beginning of like a new, very fulfilling cycle that's going to lead me into hopefully a very long and healthy old age, because, you know, that's also something I start to think about more and more with having a daughter is like, am I going to become a liability to her? I need to start taking care of myself really well so that when I'm 80 years old, like, she's going to be afraid to line up in the pasture and have a foot race with me, because I'm going to still be alive and kicking and running this place, and not a vegetable that she has to take care of.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the lasting impacts, or the downstream impacts of that relationship that you're beginning to form with the land, and all of like the personal development that comes from that, and also like we already talked about how it impacts your wife, your daughter, your friends, and as the relationship you have with the land that you live on and live with grows in its depth, I think that will continue to impact people like in a more deep way.
That was
Good
fun.
stuff.
Yeah.
Nate, thank you, man. This has been awesome.
Cool.